Hey everybody, hope you all are doing well. Hope you're having a good week and a good end of your summer. I'm so looking forward to fall. I am just jumping in. Our weather has been cool the last day or two and is supposed to for a couple more days before it heats back up. We usually have a couple of false falls here in Arkansas and we just expect them. But it has been really nice today to actually feel cold. It was raining and then we got into the car and had the air conditioner running. We were soaked and we were freezing. And we were just kind of freezing the rest of the day. My daughter and I went out today to just shop and hang out together. My 16-year-old daughter, Avalon. And we went to a bookshop and we went to get some clothes and we went to Hobby Lobby and went to lunch and just kind of spent the day together, and it was really, really nice. But it was really cold too, which was really great. So I just thought I'd come on and kind of chat with you guys a little, talk to you about the stuff that I've been reading lately. I really haven't done a reading update in a couple of weeks. I did travel to Hot Springs, so that was where my last reading update came from. And then this last weekend, I took one of my daughters, Sela, who is just turned 19. It was her birthday weekend. Two of my kids have birthdays that weekend. I took Sela to Austin, Texas with her friend, and they went to a convention, and I spent the day... Well, I took some footage. I'll put it at the end of the video. I spent the day not doing what I thought I would do because I don't think that people in Austin, Texas actually have homes. I think that they spend all day long driving in their cars and trying to find a place to park. So, country girl went to the city and spent her day driving. But anyway, yeah, I have a few little clips I'll put on the end. You guys can laugh at me there. But anyway, I wanted to share with you guys what I've been reading because I've read quite a bit since that last update. When we got back, everybody was sick. My whole household was like the plague hit and nobody wanted to do anything. Nobody wanted to get up and get around, and it's just been kind of a relaxing, chill sort of trying to recover week. I think they gave me a little bit of it because I'm not feeling 100%. And then the last thing that I did want to share with you guys before I get into the books is for the last couple of months, I've kind of vaguely talked about how our family was going through something hard. And that is the illness of my mother's husband. And that's why I went out to Oregon, was he had gone into the hospital, and I wanted to be with Mom and just kind of help her through those first few days of transitioning right into some hard stuff. Well, he ended up passing away yesterday in the afternoon. And so if you would keep my mom in your prayers, I would really appreciate that. She is usually the first one to come on here and comment and talk to us, answer. Yeah, every now and then I'll put something in the video, like, well, you better ask Mom about that because I don't remember. And then she'll answer for us in the comments. But she has been missing for the last couple of months as she's been spending that time with her husband. But she's been saving up all of these videos to watch when she's ready. So she will be back eventually, but if you would keep her in your prayers just for peace and direction and all the stuff, right? You can imagine. So I appreciate that. So without any further stuff, let's get into the things that I have been reading. The first thing that I read since last talking to you guys was the short story of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button. So I did not read this whole collection, just that one story. I've read it before a couple of times and wanted to read it again. This time I kind of caught on to some of the really jerk things that he says about, I guess it's the times. But I don't know, I didn't like this story so much as I had in the past. And one of the things that was really weird about it is it never mentions a mother, ever, in the story. And so if I cared enough to do a deep dive on that, I would, to try to figure out why that is. But basically, the story of The Curious Case of Benjamin Button is born old, right? So the only mention or even allusion to a mother is when it's talking about the husband going to I don't even know if he talks about it when he goes to the hospital, just saying something like the family was going to have a baby or something. Anyway, so the mother births an old person. Maybe there's no mention of a mother because she doesn't survive. I don't know. It doesn't mention that, but if she birthed an old person, like a full-grown person, let's just not go there. Anyway, the guy was like 70, 80, I don't know. He was old. And then within, like, so each year of his life, he actually loses a year of age, right? So he ages backwards. So in 20 years, he's 50. In 40 years, he's 30. And so you can imagine all the things, right? He does get married, and he, like, gains youth. His wife is losing youth. And so it just kind of goes through that, and then, you know, it ends. And throughout the entire story, there's no mention of a mother. That's interesting to me. But, yeah, it was kind of meh. I don't know. I was all hyped up and then kind of disappointed. And then I read through my little tourist brochure of when I went to see the Jane Austen house at Bath, the museum. And it says on the front that there are 34 lesser known Jane Austen facts. And so one of my things was, I wonder if there's any facts in here that I do not yet know. And there were a couple that I was surprised by. One that I thought was neat is that since October of 1833, Jane Austen's novels have never been out of print. It talks about how there are 14 kisses in Jane Austen's novels, but none of them are between the hero and heroine. I never picked up on that. It does talk in here about how she brewed her own beer and orange wine. And when I was there, it did have a little thing about that. And it had some of her recipes. One of the recipes was for her ink and talked about what combination of stuff she used to make her ink. I thought that was pretty cool. And then we got to use some ink made that way, I'm assuming, to like write stuff with a quill, you know, with a pen that she would have used, and not like her own pen, but you know, similar, a reproduction. So read through that little booklet. All right, now I read 3 novels. 2 of them were 1 stars. Actually, I started 4 novels. 1 of them I DNF'd. 2 of them were 1-star reads. The third is probably my favorite fiction read of the year so far. So one of the 1-star reads, which I was so disappointed, is this one called Pride and Prometheus by John Kessel. Now, this has the coolest idea. It is a mashup between Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein. And in the story, Mary Bennet, which if you remember, she was kind of like the bookworm sister that, you know, people made fun of, whatever. She ends up forming a friendship and attraction to the Dr. Frankenstein, like the dude who made the monster in Frankenstein. And I just thought that was such a genius idea. There are other people mentioned in here, like Mary Anning, who was the paleontologist. It interjected bits of persuasion and it talked about, you know, when she fell off the cob, and they're talking about it like back at the hotel, just kind of like in a side conversation. But, you know, if you've read it, you know, in my mind, so much of that era is kind of disjointed, like making the connection that Pride and Prejudice and Frankenstein, like those characters could have like known each other, right? But it just never really came together in my mind. And so this book kind of put a bunch of, and Mary Anning too, right? It just kind of put a bunch of pieces together, and I loved it. I loved the first part of this book. Like I was thinking, oh, 5-star read for sure, like within pages. I was just completely hooked. Mary was being an independent woman who was, you know, forming relationships with, you know, people that weren't weirdos, like Mr. Collins, on her own. And I was just so proud of her. I was just so loving the direction that this tale, I thought it was genius. But then it was like some other author just sort of took over and just made it his mission to completely wreck everything. It literally, the voice of this author changed so drastically that I did wonder if maybe either he picked it back up again after years or he did just hand it off to somebody else. Like, it was so weird to me how drastically different the rest of this book seemed compared to the first. And I'm not the only one. If you go through Goodreads, you'll see a couple of other people saying similar things. I don't want to go into the parts that were just so off the rails, because they are major spoilers, but just trust me, if you were a Jane Austen fan, like, I don't know, maybe you'll love it. Maybe you'll love it. I don't know. I guess I can't tell you what to read. You gotta read. You gotta make these decisions for yourself. The story became really disjointed. On one page, someone has learned to walk, and then on the next page, they're learning to walk. It's like they just kind of, here, we'll just throw it all together, right? And kind of Frankenstein it together, maybe, to finish the book up. Once I finally got to the just like drizzly, dribbly end of this book, I was just like, I feel so stupid. It was like the book made me dumber for a minute. I really, really did not enjoy this. And I was so bummed because, like I said, it had potential. But yeah, I am not even keeping this. This thing is going far, far away to some other poor, unsuspecting reader. All right, and then I was trying to finish up the Prairie Trail reading challenge that Anne from In Search of Wonder did through August, which was a super fun idea. And I had lots of books picked out of my pile of possibilities, and I actually got through quite a few of them. And then about halfway through the month, I was kind of like, yeah, I'm ready to read something, about something else now. And so I did, and then I was like, oh wait, I'm trying to get points in this challenge, because on her Discord she has a little points chart, right? And there's one thing you have to do in order to get on the board in the first place, and that is to read a historical fiction about the westward expansion, the Oregon Trail, etc. And I think that was supposed to be easy. But for someone who reads mainly nonfiction classics and biographies, I was like, historical fiction? I struggled so bad. I finally settled on, I'm going to read these, Jeanette Oke books that I used to read when I was in my 20s that I loved. And so I was like, okay, that's what I'm going to read. I was all set. I was ready to roll. And then I realized, they're set in Canada. And we're talking about the westward expansion of the U.S. So then I bought O Pioneers by Willa Cather. And I started it and I was just bored, but I am going to read it one of these days, but I was bored with it. And the copy I got was so thin. The papers were so thin that I could see on the other side of it. And so it was really difficult for me to read. And never mind the fact that I need new glasses. That is beside the point. And so it was published just a really thin edition, but my mother has a version of O Pioneers that is considerably thicker. And I think that they were just trying to do it in these little slim volumes, and it was not nice to do that tiny print with that cheap paper. So I'm probably going to borrow it from my mom and read her version, which is on really nice, thick, good collector's edition paper, and see if I can enjoy O Pioneers. But anyway, that was a tangent. All that to say, the next book I read was another 1-star read, and that is The Scarlet Thread by Francine Rivers. Now, I read this book about 25 years ago, and I remember not totally loving it then, but it was okay. And I remember, this is probably really like a Mandela effect sort of an issue, because I remember the storyline of this book having something about a scarlet thread all through the story. In this book, there's just a scarlet thread sewn within a quilt, and they only talk about it a couple of times, and they never really make the connection that Jesus is the scarlet thread that has been all throughout history, weaving us all together or binding us together or whatever. He's in everything, and he is, his scarlet thread has shown, way back to Rahab and all this stuff. And I'm like, I remember reading this whole thing that made that connection, and it was just a really strong theme, and that's nowhere in here. So did I read a different story and I'm now living in an alternate universe? Am I thinking of something else? What is going on here? Why am I remembering a completely different theme than this story? Or 25 years ago when I was 20 and barely a functioning adult, let alone a decent Christian or decent human in general. Did I just come up with that? With my excellent powers of spiritual discernment at that age? Probably not. Anyway, that's a little bit of a diversion. So, The Scarlet Thread is a dual timeline story. And when I read this, that was the first dual timeline story I had ever read. And I was like, wow, this is kind of crazy. This is kind of cool. So is she like the first dual timeline author ever? I don't know. It's possible. But one story is set in her contemporary times, which was the 90s. And then one story is set during the Oregon Trail. In the contemporary story, which is now historical fiction for us, there is a couple and they end up moving and the wife's not happy about it and they fight and fight and fight and fight and fight to the point where they're ready to just break up, and there's just this whole thing. There's just all these things. And it's just depressing for many pages. This is a very thick book. It is just all the way depressing. And that storyline. And then you have the historical fiction story, which is following the girl in the contemporary stories, like ancestor, aunt, or grandma, I think, following her story and how she ends up leaving the town that she lives in to travel on the Oregon Trail with her husband, and all of the things that happen and all of the times in which she needs to trust in God to get her through and sustain her, and etc. It also is extremely depressing. Now, I don't know if it is just like the drama of the 90s and early Christian fiction or what, but it was really difficult to find the redemption story throughout. Like, you eventually get it, and eventually it's just kind of a real basic thing. But it is so depressing for so long. Like, I have felt rotten this whole week, and I'm like, maybe it was that book. Has that book, like, really put me into, like, this little mini depression? It was really a bummer. It was just, it didn't even end spectacularly in this completely redeeming way. And so I really did not enjoy it. Another major beef that I have with this book, and is why I am going to unhaul it. I am not keeping this book at my home for my daughters to get a hold of. In this book, there is someone who cheats on, a man who cheats on his spouse. And the events leading up to it seem to be very much blamed on the woman and her lack of being a decent wife and homemaker. So I'm just going to tell you this part, okay? So if you have plans on reading this, you may want to skip ahead a little bit. It might get a little bit spoily, but I'll try to be vague. But this is a really important thing that I just want people to understand. And I want my daughters to understand. I don't want them to read this. Because there's this mentality, it's like a doormat mentality. And some of the examples of this woman not being a good enough wife are things like she bought bagged salad for dinner instead of making a fresh one. Or she made spaghetti for the second time that month. Or she did all her laundry in the morning, but saved the folding and putting away of it for the afternoon because she liked to fold it while she was watching her favorite soap opera. And so things like that. Supposedly this makes her a lousy wife. And it is implying that that is one of the reasons why her husband decided to cheat on her. She needs to come into 2025. It's like Francine Rivers' voice sort of takes over in like this clueless church lady counselor thing, explaining and warning women, if you don't act like the proper Christian woman, well, you're going to push your husband away and he just may cheat on you. And it's kind of all driven home with this one line, and there are other lines like this, but there is one line where the wife who was cheated on says, "If I'd been the wife I should have been, you never would have turned to her." No. There are other ways of working through the possible self-centeredness of your wife, right? If your wife is struggling to keep up with her end of the deal, right? End of the bargain, whatever. Like when my husband and I got married and throughout our marriage, as we've grown and things have changed, we make a kind of a bargain, right? Like you do this stuff, I'll do this stuff. This is our partnership. And so there's expectations for him and there's expectations for me. Like that's okay if you guys are all fine with the expectations. If she's not living up to them, then sure, the dude can go and talk to her about it, get some counseling, come up with some plans. But cheating on her, no, that's not acceptable. I don't think that actually even needs to be said. Blaming her for the sin, it's ridiculous. And this is another example of the anti-woman propaganda that women push on people. Like, if we're going to go all feminist here, who needs the patriarchy when we can destroy women ourselves just fine with no men involved? I think that there's much more damage in this story than there is redemption. And so, yeah, it's not staying in my library. It is going by. But I did get 30 points and avoided dysentery in Anne's Prairie Trail game. So that was the plus side of reading this book for sure. All right, and then after that, I picked up The Midnight Library by Matt Haig. I read like 60 pages into this. I was intrigued by the idea, but it just moved really slow. There was profanity, which you all know that I hate. But it moved really slow, and the character was so depressing, which I think is the point. But, enough is enough. Like, let's add a little bit of comic, relief in here. And it was flat. Like, the different things that were happening to her, she basically had the opportunity to live her life over again in different scenarios, like in different alternate realities. And so when she'd go into these and, live this life that she really, really thought she wanted to live, and it didn't turn out the way she thought it would, and so, she comes back out of that and tries another reality, whatever. It was flat. It was not interesting. There was no big wow. There was no big emotional whatever that made me even be interested in continuing to read it. So I'm going to unhaul that one. But let me tell you about this last one. So this book is absolutely incredible. If you are an Agatha Christie fan, read this book. Read it now. Read it yesterday. This is called The Mystery of Mrs. Christie by Marie Benedict. Now, I almost did not pick up this book. I think I talked to you guys about that on one of my book haul videos. I got it from Barnes & Noble. I was just kind of dorking around. My husband and I had gone in there. I think it must have been like on our anniversary. And he really wanted me to pick out some stuff because it was his way of like buying me an anniversary gift, right? But I was starting to feel a little saturated, which I might talk about in a minute. But just like, I got a lot of stuff. I'd like to move through what I have, right? Anyway, I saw that book and I almost didn't buy it because here's the deal. Agatha Christie in real life disappeared for like 11 days. She was going through a divorce with her husband. He actually was cheating on her with a younger, beautiful, thinner woman, whatever, who hadn't already had a kid. And Agatha was feeling pretty dumpy and down on herself, so the story goes, and disappeared for 11 days. And 11 days later, she was found at a spa hotel, supposedly with amnesia. And after a few days of being reunited with her home and family and, servants and child and all the stuff, she got her memory back and all was well. She went on to really never talk about it again. She doesn't mention it in her autobiography, as far as I understand. And it's just like it never happened. So the only record we have of it is what's on the police books and what's in the newspapers. Okay, so that's the real life story in a nutshell. Well, I have always looked at that story and just thought, okay, like Agatha Christie, and this was before I even read anything by her. I just like watched her shows on TV, the shows based on her books. And I was just like, she might be a great writer and everything, but it's really hard for me to respect her because that was such a drama queen, desperate move, right? Like, I always thought that she just did it to try to get the attention of her husband, to like one last ditch effort to make him want to be with her because she was going to scare him into staying. And I always just kind of like didn't respect her for that. I was just like, have some self-respect, lady, and why grovel, sort of a thing. And so it always kind of bothered me. And so I wasn't going to get the book because I was like, I already know what this mystery is. I just had this whole preconceived idea in my head of what actually happened and why, what the motives were and all these things, that I just didn't even want to read the story that Marie Benedict had written. But I did end up getting it. And then a couple of nights ago, I just happened to be like, might as well just read this. And I was hooked immediately. And I am so blown away. Like, this author is a genius when it comes to writing out this story, the idea that she came up with, the reasons behind it. And maybe it's just a really big duh. Like, maybe most people who read this was like, oh yeah, that's a great, of course she did that. I was like blown out of the water. I was like intrigued. I was just like page by page, just soaking in this book to the very end. I put it down and I was just like, satisfied sigh. Like, this is so great. I so much hope that it happened this way. Of course, I'm not going to tell you anything about what the author actually wrote, but I will tell you that it is in true Agatha Christie fashion, which never occurred to me that it would be so. I was completely engrossed. There is an unreliable narrator, which really helps. I don't read a lot of books with an unreliable narrator, and now I'm like, I kind of want to. So I'm going to look for some. If you guys have any recommendations on good books with unreliable narrators, let me know, because that's just so much fun. And I got to the end of it and I was just like, genius. Like, this has got to be the best fiction I've read this year so far. My only beef with this story at all is that she spoils the mystery of the murder of Roger Ackroyd. But I already knew, because Lucy Worsley, my nemesis, spoiled that in the biography of Agatha Christie that I read, that she wrote a couple of years ago. And so I already knew, but it was kind of weird. And I guess she does spoil a couple other books in this story, but I didn't catch on, maybe because I already knew the story, so it didn't occur to me. I don't know. But reading one of the Goodreads reviews, a girl talked about 3 specific stories that she felt were spoiled in this book. So anyway, if you love Agatha Christie, pick up this book. It was so good. It was so worth it. I just flew through it. It is told in the, it goes back and forth between timelines, kind of like, it goes like this, right? It starts out, the timelines are here and here, but then they merge like this. And then the last part of the book is the one timeline. And every few pages, they flip back and forth. But it's telling a continuous story. So you're not at all confused, like not at all. You'll see what I mean when you read it. But I think that really helped me to read through it really quickly and stay engrossed. I picked up another book by this author today when I was out shopping. I can't remember. I think it's the one about the J.P. Morgan Library, the librarian. And in my last video, I talked about the book Passing. What did I do with that? Ella Larson, Passing, I think is who wrote that. And it's about a Black woman who chose to pass as white. And I think that's also what went on with this librarian at the J.P. Morgan Library. I think she was a Black woman who passed as white. And this is kind of her story that Marie Benedict wrote. And so I picked that up today also because I just thought she was such a great writer and just such a genius that I'm going to try her again and see. So have you guys read anything by her? Let me know. I have seen stuff by her and owned and then DNF'd different stories, but yeah. Okay. Anything else? I feel like I said I was going to talk about something else and now I don't remember what it is. So if I remember and it's important, I'll put something down in the comments for you guys. Otherwise, hope you're having a beautiful day. I will see you soon. Bye-bye. Good morning. I am coming to you from Austin, Texas today, which is about 9 hours from where I live in Arkansas. I have come down here for the weekend to take my daughter and her friend to a convention, and I have been a little bit salty about it because I just really want to be home. I've done a lot of traveling lately and I'm really done. But this morning we were in our hotel room. The girls were getting ready to go to their convention for today. They're just going for this one day. And I was like, I just want to be home and, kind of having a fit. And then I was like, you know what? That is so dumb. That is so selfish of me and just like whiny and ungrateful. So I was like, I have the opportunity to travel this weekend. I should take advantage. So I am in Austin, Texas, the capital of Texas. We are right downtown, like right smack in the middle of it, downtown. And I have the whole day to do bookish things. So I am at BookPeople, which is one of the well-known bookshops around here. And I'm gonna go in and check it out. And then I have found a couple of places. I can't remember the name of the museum. I think it's on a college campus that has some neat, rare, old bookish things. So I'm gonna try to go check that out. And then there is also the O. Henry Home and Museum here. O. Henry, who wrote a lot of short stories. The most popular one that I know of is The Gift of the Magi. And so anyway, he has a home. His home and museum is here as well, so I might even check that out today. And then I have a couple more bookshops on my list in case I have a chance to get to those, but I've got about 6 or 7 hours to kill, and I'm gonna do it doing bookish things. All right. I like this store. It's got a lot of really neat things in here. Tons of books and bookish things like journals and socks and postcards and, you know, all kinds of bookish gifts. And it's like, it has all the stuff kind of like Barnes and Noble has, but cooler, and it's an independent bookshop. But I was kind of hoping to find a used bookshop so I could maybe find some older or out of print things. So I didn't end up buying anything, but I gave you a look around anyway, and I can add it to my list of 15 new bookshops for the year. And so I think I'm gonna drive around just a little bit and kind of look at stuff. I have an hour before those other museums open up that I want to go to. I'll probably just go drive around town a little bit and get a feel for what Austin looks like. This is Woolridge Square, and I just happened to come across this as I was driving. So this square here is the site of lots of different rallies and just public, you know, get-togethers over the years. According to these signs here, it looks like as early as 1911 we had Booker T. Washington out here making a speech in the evening of September 29th. It says that he addressed a crowd between 5,000 to 7,000, and at the time, Austin had a population of 30,000. He wanted to speak at the Capitol building here in Austin, but they wouldn't allow him to. So he came to this square and spoke. And then this sign talks about other, groups over the years. Civil rights marches often ended here at this square. And then this one talks about how the Votes for Women rallies were held here in 1914. So lots of history here just on this spot. It's a central location for people who want to make their voices heard in the Austin area. All right, so both of the places that I was thinking about visiting, the parking is insane. So one of them is on the campus of the college, and I think it's like back to school day. This is a Sunday. Maybe everybody's getting into their dorms or something, but it is insane over there, and I cannot find parking. I literally circled probably 45 minutes that area trying to find a place to park relatively close walking distance, and there's nothing. So same thing with the O. Henry Museum. I'm not seeing good parking. So I decided just, you know what, I'm just gonna sit and read and write today and it'll be fine. So then I was like, well, maybe I'll go eat somewhere nice. Parking. So now I'm realizing that I'm really cheap, and maybe I should get used to the idea of parking garages and paying the fee, because where I'm from, we have parking garages, but a lot of them are free, and you also just know where to park, where people are fine with you parking, and then you can walk right to those more populated parts of our town. And so I just don't know where that is here in Austin. I am finding that I do a whole lot better touring a city when I am just on foot, but I don't know my way around here, and I don't have like a hotel home base right now, and I have my car, so I guess I'm just gonna go have some lunch, read, write, and maybe try the O. Henry House again. I think it will have a better chance of parking than the other museum that I was trying to hit on the college campus. So anyway, I was thinking I would go, I was thinking I would go and eat somewhere nice, but yeah, parking. So I came to this mall where there's a Panera Bread, and I'm gonna eat at Panera, which would be fine, except for I have a Panera at home, so that's not quite as fun, but it's all gonna be fine. I am convinced that the people of Austin, Texas cannot possibly actually have homes. I think that they spend all of their time either parked in parking garages and walking places, or driving around looking for parking spots. I have been out about 5 hours trying to go somewhere to do something, and I have done very little except drive around looking for a place to park. So my bookish adventure in Austin is not quite as awesome as I would have hoped, but it has been eye-opening in other respects. I've got about 2.5 hours now until I need to pick up my daughter and her friend and head north a little more. We're gonna drive about an hour north and then stay in a hotel and then drive the rest of the way tomorrow. So I'm gonna go into this Barnes & Noble. I know, here I am at a Barnes & Noble again, but according to the pictures I saw on Facebook, this one is 2 stories, and I don't get to go into a 2-story one very often, so I'm gonna go check it out. And then right next door to it is a Cheesecake Factory, which I'm not planning on going into, but I just want to take a video of it because This is crazy. Like, the way it is decorated, it is really cool. And even this Barnes & Noble looks different on the outside. So I know that there are probably way cooler places in the world to visit than Barnes & Noble and the Cheesecake Factory, but I am a 90s child, and in the little town that I lived in Eastern Oregon, we had to drive a couple of hours to get to any kind of, you know, cool mall or whatever. We had to actually drive into Boise, Idaho. And that's where we could find the Barnes & Noble and the Cheesecake Factory. And so, in my imagination, those are the super cool places that you go when you're visiting the mall. So anyway, I'll go and check out this shop, and then, I don't know, I'm probably just gonna go get some gas and sit here in the air-conditioned car and read until time to pick up my girls.